Greetings, and thank you for joining us tonight for the reading on Christ's letters. We're at the very beginning of letter 2. So whatever document you have with the letter, turn to that page or have it in your lap, or just close your eyes and meditate with this time. So I'd like to begin with a centering. So I ask you to just get comfortable where you are. Just relax. Relax into this now moment. Allow any thought, concerns, worries, fears to just disappear for now. We open ourselves to the Christ presence within us. That the Christ, through these readings, awakens, nurtures, and nourishes, allowing it to just come into its fruition in this lifetime, in this now moment. So just allow the mind to be free of any thought, even good thoughts. Just be open to the stillness and silence, and allow the seeds of the divine to come through these letters, through these transcriptions, directly to us. And I just ask that as we read this letter tonight, we feel the presence of Jesus as if we're right there, either back there 2,000 years ago, or bring him to here in present day, and just walk with him out of the village with all the excitement he's experienced, all the villagers that he wants to tell, and all the villages that he wants to walk through and heal and tell the people about the God he found. And now Christ has come to reveal all that Jesus said in a way that we can believe it, understand it, and take it into our 2018 year and make a difference in our lives and the lives of those around us. So I give thanks for our being together at this time. And I know as we have opened ourselves to that direct connection with the Christ within, with the Christ through the letters, we realize more and more of who we truly are through these revelations. So just feel that presence within, around, through, and as you. It is the room that we're in. Just feel us together in the same room at the same time. Just having conversation. And if you have questions, feel free to write to me at chapelinthesky@aol.com. That's CHAPELINTHESKY@AOL.com. So let's go to the letter. And I have a couple of previews. So let's just honor this moment, the sacredness of it, of our being together, opening ourselves to the Christ, to speak directly to us, to remind us what he went through and what he intended to teach us, to reveal to us. So I take this as Jesus' autobiography from the Christ of him. So rest in that place. Rest in the awareness. Rest in the consciousness. With an open mind, we listen for truth. We listen for the love that makes us free. I accept it as ours right here and right now. And I allow it to be so. And so it is. Before reading a new letter or opening a new letter, I'd like to begin with Christ's introduction to the letters. It helps me remember why I've come together with you and you with me. It reminds us why Christ decided to come in 2000 with these letters. So I read this with the joy of knowing this is happening, that I'm seeing this more and more. I can look at the other, I don't pay attention to that. So the letters free us from those occurrences. They're healthy ways of dealing with it, and Christ knows how to do it. So I read from Christ Returns, Reveals Startling Truth. Christ says, I have come to rectify the misinterpretations placed on the teachings given when known as Jesus in Palestine 2018 years ago. Christ also says, because people are on the threshold of a world crisis of enormous proportions, it is vital for survival that I, the Christ, should reach all who will listen. Reading my letters gives you the true processes of creation in which you yourselves play a major role. It is imperative you should understand them sufficiently to enable you to embark on the implementation of a higher vision for all humanity, beginning with ourselves, I interject. It is impossible for my spiritual consciousness to take on human form. To enable me to speak to you directly, I've deprogrammed and prepared a receptive, obedient mind to receive my truth and frame it in words. She is my recorder. And so I always like to pause for the recorder because she's so meaningful to me. In the early days of my being in the letters back in 2006 and probably up to 2010, the recorder and I had very personal relationship, a lot of communications. And I miss that, but she's going to be 95 on the 13th. So it's just a couple of days away. So she's still with us. Keep her in your thoughts and your prayers for quality of life and quality for transition. You know, I know the Christ of her is on both sides, just carrying her through. So, okay, so that's the introduction, and that to me is very, very important. You know, we look around the world and the media is very good about telling us all that's going wrong. But we're the creators of a different world. And so basically, if I'm not a creator of that, then for me it doesn't exist in my creation. It exists, but it's sort of like protection. It's like in its own entity. So I want to read an introduction to letter 2, which we're going to read in a little bit. In this letter, Christ continues the story of his life on earth, his return to his mother in Nazareth, and his reception, ! His first public healing and the tremendous response, choosing his disciples and his true teachings. Okay, so that's what we're going to get in letter 2. Okay, so just settle in as we come back. Christ returns, reveals startling truth. Letter 2. This letter should be pondered rather than read. So I encourage you always to read the letter to yourself. Out loud is even better, but stop, pause, think about what's being said, what it means in yours and my present life. I am the Christ. If you're not reading along, Christ is capitalized, bolded, underlined. And I just want to say that I add my exclamation to that also. There is no doubt for me that these letters came from the Christ of Jesus, because I knew him very intimately, if you haven't heard that before. While I operate from the highest realms of divine creative consciousness, my influence encircles your world. Speaking metaphorically, I am as distant in consciousness from your world as your sun is distant from earth. Yet, if you call on me sincerely, I am as close to you as is necessary to help you. There will be many who will be unable to receive these letters. Such people are not yet ready for them. There will be those who will try to stifle their existence, since the teachings will be threatening their livelihood or religion. They will not succeed. These letters will be strengthened by opposition. There will be those who will receive these letters with joy, since in their souls they have known that beyond the religions of the world has been truth, the reality of existence. These are the people who will prosper and will eventually save the world from self-annihilation. And that's why I'm committed, and that's why you're committed. Because we know it can end in self-annihilation. It's like, this world is too beautiful. The potential of it, of all of us, just too great for that. I will now take up my autobiography from where I left off in my last letter. My purpose in giving you some of the biological details of my entrance into public life as teacher and healer is to bring alive for you my youthful attitudes and behavior, the circumstances of my attaining my own state of spiritualized humanhood. And he doesn't talk about his childhood much in this letter as he does in letter 1 before he's baptized. It is important you should be able to visualize Palestine as it was when I was on earth and clearly see the inner conflicts which my teachings aroused in the people indoctrinated in the Jewish beliefs and traditional rites. These conflicts lie at the heart of the gospel's inability to record accurately all that I tried to teach them. In the Gospels are frequent references to my parables describing the reality of the kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God, whichever term the gospel is used. But nowhere has any attempt been made to reach into the words themselves, explore the figures of speech, or lift out the spiritual meaning of the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. At the end of letter 1, we talked about mindset. And the mindset of the individual limits them to how far they'll go out of it. Going out of the box is difficult. We may not know there's a truth higher than the truth we know. So for me, it's being always open to the higher truth, the higher truth, the higher truth. As I speak of my true sermons given to the people, you will, in the light of my experiences in the desert and of your own knowledge of scientific facts, be able to understand at last a little of what I attempted to teach at that time. Since I was largely unsuccessful, it is imperative another attempt should be made to do so. At the beginning of this age, this millennium, since it is on my privileged, highest spiritual knowledge and insight that the next age will be founded and developed. It was and is essential for a teacher such as I and others have been, supersensitive and wholly committed mentally and emotionally to a search for truth of existence, to come to earth, to coin words, to describe to people on earth, imprisoned in words, what lies in the creative universal dimension in an unformed state, which he does in letter 5 very beautifully. So, says in the introduction, he's here to show us the true process of creation, which we ourselves play a major role. So as we learned in the previous letter, our thought with feeling, it is what creates our choices, or what creates. It's that simple. And so we have many of these teachers on earth now. We have many who are seeking and finding, as are you. And it's my desire is to bring forth the leadership in you, the authentic you that's already there, and have you take on a leadership role. being the light is being the light all the time. We don't turn it off. So I just encourage you to have that confidence in what you read. It doesn't come all at once. It can come overnight. It took Jesus 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. We can do it differently. So it's all about the words. The words try to express the pictures of thought. And depending on the vocabulary and the perceptions of the two people involved in any communication is going to depend on what the communication is. And it'll always be right for both of them. Even if there's misunderstanding, it's still right for whichever one, because they both cause the misunderstanding. So, sorry, that's a lesson in communication. Okay, so it's all about words, words, words. And he wants to describe to people on earth, which we are imprisoned in words. They're a barrier. The words have no power but the power we give them. Telling someone you're fired can be very, very traumatic. But another one is, okay, it's the end of this, what's next? So it's all attitude. So we grow by going beyond the words, looking for what the word in that context means and how to make it bring the picture together. At least that's the way it works in my mind. So what really lies in the creative universal process in its unformed state is what we're seeking. Were it not for such inspired teachers as myself and the others, people on earth would have remained in ignorance of all that lies beyond the earth. Ready for contact, to be personally experienced and absorbed to promote future spiritual evolution. So this is what Christ is saying, that we have this direct relationship, that the spirit of you is one with the spirit of the infinite is. And we have many dimensions to go from the finite being that I am to the infinite being that these letters are coming from. So not only this, the Bible is said to be the most widely read book in the world. In its present form, it has served its purpose. The New Testament, as it stands, with all its baggage of misinterpretation, is a deterrent to spiritual evolution. It is now time to move forward into a new realm of mystical perception and understanding. Now, Jesus isn't really saying anything negative there. He's just saying that the mindset that's been developed is not a healthy one. It's a mindset based on ignorance, misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and many of them are taught. We have people with belief system teaching people the same belief system through the Christian religions, whatever it is. But there's a higher God than the one that they're conceiving. There's a God that's beyond form. There's a God that's formless. It can't be everywhere present if it's locked in a form. So this is what Christ is bringing us, but back in those days, now we talk about ghosts, we talk about spirits, and we talk about, fantasy things. But these letters say, you've got all that advantage that I didn't have when I talked to the people 2,000 years ago. So you're fortunate because I, Jesus, can now talk to you at a level of understanding where you can do something with it. You can, 2,000 years ago, I still stopped the annihilation. I put it off another 2,000 years. So I've come now to see if we can permanently stop the possibility. So I want to know that anything we've heard from Christianity, there's still truth in it. Jesus isn't saying throw it all away. There are certain aspects of it that have been overemphasized and have created a mindset that's not a healthy one. It's not the one that Jesus came to give us. It's not the Christ mindset. It's a deified Jesus mindset that we Christians have lived in. Okay, I'm sorry. I will try to keep. I just love being with my man. He's just it. Since it is possible for me to descend into human body again, to speak to the world, and I have other dimensions to whom I minister. I have trained a sensitive soul to receive and transcribe. It is the nearest I can come to talking to you personally. I hope you will be able to receive and accept this. Whatever is erroneous is erased. You may be sure of this. The incidents and healings related in the following pages are not important. They happened, but they are given only to enable you to understand their true spiritual significance. I want you, as you read, to relate the conditions of 2,000 years ago to your present life and times. I want you to regard the persona of Jesus as an icon of what can eventually be achieved by every human being who is ready and willing to become a founding member of the kingdom of heaven on earth. I'm going to reread that, okay? Because this is the banner that I'm waving, and I hope you're waving it right along with me. As you read, I want you to relate to the conditions of 2,000 years ago to your present life and times. I want you to regard the persona of Jesus as an icon, the potential, the example, however we want to say it, of what can eventually be achieved by every human being who is ready and willing to become a founding member of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Although people of your present world are what you call sophisticated, big-headed in their modern knowledge and learning, versed in contemporary manners, and in new ways of relating one to another, basically the people of those years ago were the same as yourselves. They were controlled and motivated entirely by their twin impulses of bonding rejection, desires repulsions, even as you are. They loved, hated, criticized, condemned, slandered, and gossiped, possessed ambitions to rise to the top of society, despised those who were failures in life, secretly slept around, as you call it, and taunted those who were different in any way to themselves. To help you fully understand and enter into my time on earth, my consciousness has descended to your plane of earthly existence to experience yet again the persona of Jesus and the emotions and events in which I was involved. When I left the desert and put foot to the road leading to my village of Nazareth, I was still elated, exuberantly joyous in the knowledge so glorious revealed to me in the desert. I focused my thoughts entirely on all that I had learned, and if my thoughts strayed to my former negative forms of thought, I swiftly turned to the Father for inspiration and determination in overcoming them. In this way, I returned constantly to the light of awareness and understanding. So he's conditioning, preparing himself. He knows that coming back into society, there are going to be many distractions. And he's already distracted just thinking about going there. So he's like preparing himself. I know these things are going to come up. And they bring him back into a negative place. And he goes back to the Father, and the Father says, here's how we'll do it. So it's very, very simple. Some people looked at me askance, seeing my joy and also my dirty, unkempt appearance. Was I happy with drink, they wondered. Others looked at me with abhorrence. Instead of reacting with anger as I had in the past, I remembered that I had been blessed with visions and knowledge they could not even begin to imagine. I blessed them and prayed for their inner vision to be similarly opened, and continued peacefully along the road to my home. There were villagers, however, who viewed my pitiful state with compassion and hurried into their houses to fetch me bread and even wine to help me on my way. There was always someone who offered shelter for the night. The Father of life indeed supplied all my needs and gave me protection as needed. All this time I said not a word about my weeks in the desert. I felt that the time was not yet ripe. Eventually, I reached my hometown Nazareth, and the villagers openly scoffed, pointed at my filthy self and tattered clothes. Dirty, lazy layabout were some of the kinder words thrown at me. I came to my mother's door with a feeling of dread, since I knew she would be more shocked than her neighbors when she saw me stand in front of her. thin, bones showing through the skin, eyes sunken and cheeks hollowed out, face burned black and lips blistered with the sun, and beard grown long and straggly. My clothes. She would be outraged when she saw my clothes, their original color wholly obscured by desert dust and the cloth torn and ragged. I mounted the steps and braced myself to endure the heat of my mother's fury. When I knocked, my sister came to the door. She looked at me open-mouthed, wide-eyed, and frightened, then slammed the door in my face. I could hear her running into the back of the house, screaming, "Mother, come quickly. There's a dirty old man at the door." I could hear my mother muttering crossly to herself. Hurrying to the door, flinging it open, she stood, rooted in shock. I smiled, but for a moment. She looked me up and down with increasing horror as she realized this dreadful creature was indeed her wayward son, Jesus. I held out my hand to her, saying, "I know I cause you much pain, but can you help me?" Immediately her expression changed, and drawing me inside, she secured the door. "Quick," she said to my frightened sister, "stop that noise and put on the water. Put water on to boil. Your brother is starved. It doesn't matter what trouble he has got into. He belongs to us. He must be looked after." Gently, she helped me take off my clothes and bent me over a large container of water and scrubbed me clean. She washed and trimmed my hair and beard and lightly covered the sores on my body and lips with healing salve. Neither of us broke the silence. I savored the love she showed me and tried to show my gratitude by a more gentle and sensitive approach. Having helped me put on a clean robe, she sat me down to a frugal meal of bread, milk, and honey. Reluctantly, she gave me wine to pick up my strength, but it was obvious she thought that wine had been the cause of my shocking plight, and we learn about that in letter 1. Then she led me to a bed and placed the cover over me. I slept for several hours and woke refreshed to a morning bright with sunshine seen through the window. So we can just sense the gentleness of his mother and also her horror. After what he's been through in letter 1, we know that he's embarrassed his whole family by his lifestyle. So, she's probably not too happy to see him in the condition he is, but she is willing to care for him as a mother would. I was now longing to talk to my mother, to tell her that I was indeed a Messiah, but not the kind the Jews imagined. I could save people from the bad results of their sin. I could help them find health, abundance, fulfillment of their needs, because I could now teach them exactly how the world had been created. As I tried to tell her, she started off by being excited and delighted. She jumped to her feet and wanted to rush out to tell the neighbors her son was indeed the Messiah. They should hear how nicely he now talked, and he had been fasting in the desert. Proud mom. But I stopped her from doing this. I said that I had not yet told her what had been revealed to me. One of the most important things I learned was that the Orthodox Jews were entirely wrong in their belief in an avenging God. There was no such thing. This frightened and upset her, and she exclaimed, "How then will Jehovah govern the world and make us good and listen to his prophets if he does not punish us? Are you now so big that you are going to tell the high priests their own business, handed down to them from the time of Moses? Are you going to bring more shame on this house?" She began to cry, saying with anger, "You have not changed a bit. You've only changed in what you're saying. You have brought me nothing but grief. How could I have ever believed you would be a Messiah? You will only lead people into greater torment than ever before with your strange ideas." And that's the mindset that she lives in. And Jesus is a different mindset, trying to bring a different mindset. My brothers heard her wailing and came running, wanting to turn me out of the house, because I did not want to I did not want a disturbance. I offered to leave peacefully. If this was how my mother reacted, I could be sure that everyone else would react in the same way to what I wanted to tell them. I realized I needed a quiet time of absolute rest and silence in which to collect my thoughts and experiences together. I would have to pray for inspired guidance on how best to approach the Jews with my message of good news. I was sure that the father life would meet my need, and I would find the right accommodation somewhere. My mother, although furious with my seemingly big-headed attitudes, was nonetheless torn with the feelings of love and compassion for my emaciated condition. She rejected everything I appeared to stand for: rebelliousness, contempt for the Jewish religion, high-handed attitudes toward authority, my self-will and arrogance, but she still loved me and was deeply afraid that I would eventually land up in greater trouble than I had ever been thought possible. She admonished my brothers, telling them to hold their noisy arguments and turn to me. "You can stay here until you are better," she said. "Perhaps while you are here, I can talk some sense into you. I can tell you now, if you go out into the streets and begin talking as you have to me, you will end up in an even worse state than ever. Good people will spit and throw their rotten rubbish all over you. You are a disgrace to your family." So despite her anger, I laughed and thanked and kissed her warmly. Gladly I remained with her, knowing very well that underneath her anger, she was deeply anxious for me. She fed me well and made me good new clothes. I appreciated all she did towards improving my appearance, as I knew that to move freely between rich and poor, I must be acceptably clad in decent garments. At times there were food shortages in the home. Drawing on the power of my father, I replenished them, saying nothing. Neither did she. I knew she wondered sadly whether to all my other bad habits I had now added that of being a thief. Then she caught me with a freshly baked loaf in my hands, and knew that I had not been out of the house to buy it, and neither had the stove been in use that day. She said nothing, but gave me a long, pondering look. I could see her attitudes change at that moment. She was no longer sure of her ground. She was beginning to question her own attitudes toward me, and also the truth of my statements. What really happened to him out there in the desert? How could he make a loaf of bread without fire, flour, and yeast? What does it mean? Is he the Messiah? Then my brother cut his hand. He was in much pain when it festered. He allowed me to put my hands on his wound and quietly pray. I could see that he felt the power flow into his hand because he looked at me strangely. "The pain has gone," he said briefly. He was surly as he walked away, and I knew that while he was relieved to be free of pain, he did not like me for having been able to help him. I sensed his jealousy. My sister scalded her hand, and another brother often complained of bad headaches. I was able to cure them both. My brothers and sisters began to joke about my magic powers. They questioned what evil I might do to them if they angered me. The tension in the home deepened, and I felt saddened for my mother, who longed for peace in the house. But she saw changes in my behavior and was comforted. I was quieter, visibly controlled. Okay, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to go back, because remember, Christ says that what I'm relating in the next few pages is not important, just to enable us to see the development of his being, his family, how he dealt with the conflict, how he dealt with scarcity, how he didn't get involved in the conflict. So he's just sharing these things to show how he's applying what he's learned in the desert to real life. And he's doing that, so he's telling us we can do the same. We can Stop resisting things. We can just let things be. So, but that's okay. So he says, I came to love her tenderly and compassionately as a mother should be loved. One day she ventured to ask me, do you still say that Jehovah is a myth? Jesus said, Job said that if Jehovah were to withdraw his breath, all flesh would collapse together. That is the Jehovah I believe in and saw. Her response is, no one has seen Jehovah. Jesus says, I saw that which has brought all things into being. I reply quietly, I call it the Father, because it is perfect love. Love more perfect than a mother's, I added, smiling at her. It works in, through, and for all its creation. It is the Father in me which has brought you the things you needed in the house and healed my brothers and sisters so swiftly. I could see she was beginning to understand a little of what I said. What of sin? She asked. There is no sin as we understand it. We are born to behave as we do. We have to find a way to overcome our human thoughts and feelings, for they separate us from the protection of the Father and bring us sickness and misery. When we have learned how to overcome the self, we will enter the kingdom of heaven. My mother turned away silently, obviously pondering what I had said to her, but no longer angry. I knew she was thinking about my statements and realized they would be turning her safe and well-known world upside down. Without her belief in a Jehovah threatening dire vengeance if mankind was unruly, she would feel lost and insecure. She would wonder how the world would ever manage if it was left entirely to men to control the evil doings of themselves and others. Even kings and governors were wicked in their actions. Without Jehovah to rule and punish sinners, where would it end? And I'm going to stop there because the next is pretty continuing the drama. He goes to the temple where he says what he says and upsets the Jews, and then he is forced to leave the temple, and he decides to leave Nazareth and go along. And he has his first healing. He finds his place to live, and he keeps telling us how he goes to the Father for all this guidance, and everything works so wonderfully for him. So I hope you'll join us next week, which will be on a Tuesday. And thank you for listening. And if you have any comments that you would like me to share in a future recording, I'd be happy to consider that at chapelinthesky@aol.com. And I'll take these off so you can see that my eyes are open, although I can never tell. Okay, I love you. Be blessed. Have a wonderful week and enjoy life. That's what it's here for. Bye-bye for now.